Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, March 31st, 9 a.m. Eastern, last day of the quarter. We're doing a bit of a public live stream here just to give a little insight into what we do with the chart guys every morning. We're going to go over the bigger picture as in terms of where we stand heading into the morning. Then going to talk about how we establish a trade game plan heading into the day in terms of which direction or which time frame we're looking at. We'll take some requests from Chart Guys members, and then the bell will ring, and we'll take it from there. So first off, NASDAQ gap down, shaping up. We have followed through from the extremely bearish Friday where there was no bounce. And we have broken to a lower low, confirming the weekly bear flag. And we know that that bear flag is not going to follow through unless a couple of things happen. Number one, the S&P 500 has to break support. It technically did by a tiny amount here, but this is the bulls at the open here attempting to defend that support level. So that's going to be key for me today as to whether or not that level can hold. In terms of bigger picture, if we're going to see bear follow through, I have to see weakness in XLF and XLV. We've talked about this a number of times in videos. XLF has to be a weekly head and shoulders that confirms a weekly downtrend by breaking 4705 support. And XLV needs to be a 2-day head and shoulders, which is closer to breaking, and that would need to drop down and break 142.86. Those two things need to happen if we're going to see significant bear follow through in the S&P 500 into the start of Q2 2025. So again, I keep talking about having checklists of what the bulls need to do and what the bears need to do. And bulls failed a couple checklists on their bounce. One of them, the most notable for me, was NVDA failed to confirm a daily uptrend. That was a red flag. So what the bears need is those things that I just mentioned, and those are going to be very important for me, bigger picture as we analyze the market as a whole in April here. So that's it, bigger picture. As far as zooming in, so we're going to talk a little bit, let's go down the rest of the sectors here, and then we'll talk a little bit about what our expectations are for today. So we've got the dollar trying to set a daily higher low. If the dollar bulls are able to confirm a daily uptrend, the weekly bounce will get some follow through. We're looking at the metals and they're still strong. Gold has been fairly inverse to the market on this drop. You can see a solid 3 green days in a row on gold gapping up. Nope, I shouldn't say gapping up. I should say continuing to all-time highs. And that's the opposite of the NASDAQ the last 3 days with a solid drop. So metal bulls are still very comfortable in gold. Silver is still battling a key resistance level. Silver is weaker than gold. And again, this is a decade-plus high that we are testing and rejecting from at the moment. That's critical for me in April, whether or not we're able to get over that resistance level, still riding some swing positions in GDX and GDXJ. Those names are opening higher with gold strength. But after the big drop on Friday, we're watching for, if I'm a bull, I'm just hoping for a daily inside bar. Just hold the low of Friday and tighten up because there is a lot of space for an hourly lower high, anything under the high of Friday on both GDX and GDXJ. So letting those swing trades play out, but I check in on them every now and again to see how they're shaping up. Oil, trying to stay strong overall. Again, a weekly lower high is the most likely scenario eventually, but it's not shaping up yet as bulls are holding on better than the S&P 500 and NASDAQ, which again are already down testing these lows. So energy, partially because of that, the energy sector has had some relative strength. Again, it's not immune to the weakness in the broader market. We are not seeing a gap down at the moment. And the daily chart obviously looks very different than SPY or QQQ. And so that's just one little pocket of relative strength to be keeping an eye on. And of course, watching the relationship to oil. This bounce in the energy sector started before oil found its support. And so there was a bit of relative strength there. Natural gas, weekly higher low is set. And again, still in a runner long position, but that is now a hard stop where if that level breaks and we confirm the weekly downtrend into monthly consolidation, I will be all out of that position. The bulls do still need to confirm a daily uptrend off of this low if we're going to follow through with that weekly bounce. But again, just another position that I'm letting play out and hoping that the bulls are able to follow through. But again, won't be surprised at all if we do get monthly consolidation in natural gas, which is the reason I was exiting some into strength on that move. Bitcoin trying to get a bounce going here. And also a little bit of relative strength, again, just in the sense that the NASDAQ would be, if it were Bitcoin, would be down here, and the S&P 500 would be right here. So a small amount of relative strength in that regard. We had Michael Saylor buying more over the weekend, helping hold things up a bit. Certainly not, couldn't tell on the chart, but we've got a bounce attempt underway right now. The 4-hour bounce is going. Anything under 83.5 is just a lower high. Bulls will be hoping for an inverse head and shoulders if we fail that level. But essentially, we can say Bitcoin is leading a morning bounce attempt right now, as that bounce attempt is already 3 hours underway. And bulls still have to confirm an hourly uptrend if we're going to follow through there. So that's one place to potentially look for a little relative strength would be crypto stocks, MSTR or Coin. You can see still gapping down on those names because of their impact from the broader market. And Bitcoin did drop a bit over the weekend. But again, if looking for a bounce, that is one place to be keeping an eye on. So how do we determine if should I be looking long? Should I be looking short? There's only 5 things that you can be as a trader as you head into the day. You can either not be trading for the day because you're sick, you've got distractions, whatever the reason, you're just not going to trade. Okay, that's one thing. What are the other 4? Bullish or bearish, of course, but aggressive or conservative for each. So I break down on my morning preparation what is each looking to do. I just put myself in the mindset. If I am an aggressive bull, I'm going to be looking at this. If I'm a conservative bull, I'm going to be waiting for this. If I'm, same thing for the bear side. And that helps me determine what I'm doing on the day. And so just using today as an example, we have a weak bounce attempt underway just over the last hour or so. But, for me personally, I'm going to be using me as a personal example a good bit, obviously. That's where I have the most experience. But I know that, out of those 4 things, being an aggressive bear is the least common route that I will take. And that's because it's not my edge. My edge as a trader through my track record of my career is being an aggressive bull, playing oversold bounces and blue sky breakouts and things like that. So I will rarely choose to be an aggressive bear. An aggressive bear is looking short on the morning. They're looking for the bell to ring and bears to keep control and get another leg down and futures to drop to lower lows. And that's definitely a possibility that's on the table, especially the more that we cool off things, overnight or pre-market here. We had the hourly RSI down almost in single digits in the NASDAQ. And that has cooled off considerably. The hourly RSI is no longer oversold. If I were going to be an aggressive bear, it is on the table as a possibility because things are cooling off and we can see another leg down. Do I feel that's the most likely scenario? I don't have a ton of conviction that we're going to see the bell ring and see another leg down, but I know it's definitely possible. Conservative bear. What's a conservative bear waiting for? Or patient bear. You could be waiting for a daily lower high, which is a swing trade conservative bear, or you can be waiting for an hourly lower high. I know that an hourly lower high is the most likely result of the next bounce that we see. Whenever that bounce happens, the bounce can happen right when the bell rings. The bounce can happen after another significant leg down. I know an hourly lower high is the most likely scenario on that bounce. And that's for the indices, and that's for a ton of individual names. So in terms of having the most conviction of having probabilities in my favor and most likely scenarios in my favor, it would be waiting for an hourly lower high. Yes, I might miss a morning bounce. Yes, I might miss a morning drop down, but eventually I will see a bounce shape up and I will see an hourly lower high eventually set. So I know that I am interested in hourly lower highs at some point today, probably today. And that's where I will have the highest conviction of a most likely scenario. So that's the bear side of things, aggressive versus conservative. On the bull side of things, if I'm an aggressive bull, I'm looking to play a morning bounce on this gap down open. Ideally, I want to see things as crushed as possible. I don't like, if I'm an aggressive bull, I don't like that we're bouncing right now. I want to see free fall, as beat up as possible. If I pull up the super stack indicator in the top right here, again, it shows us what's the RSI on all these different time frames. We are at extremes on the 4-hour. Again, I'm looking at the NASDAQ futures. We're extremes on the 4-hour, but we're not even oversold on any of the short term, and we're not oversold on any of the long term. So what does that tell me? That means we can absolutely see another leg down. I'm most confident in my aggressive bounce plays when the 5, the 15-minute, and the hourly are all crushed as well. Because that tells me, okay, even if we don't get a 4-hour bounce going, we're at least likely to get a short-term bounce in the short term that allows me to position a bit and try and position for that longer term bounce. But because of where we stand right now, again, the bell can ring and we can easily see another leg down. And yes, the 4-hour will still be beat up, but that's when we'll see the short-term RSI levels start to get beat up as well. So as in terms of, do I want to be an aggressive bull this morning? Because the bounce that is taking place in pre-market, I'm probably not going to choose that route. And there's a ton of other factors as well as in terms of which I choose. For me personally, I really like how my Q1 trading has gone, mostly in my day trade account. And, over the next 3 quarters of the year, if I just do half of what I did in Q1 in each of those quarters, I have a really solid year. So I have no reason to be looking to go aggressive counter momentum right now because, the last thing I want to do is start giving back a really good Q1 and the profits that I've locked in already just by, deciding to be aggressive in a spot where maybe I should choose to be more conservative. If I want to be a conservative bull, I'm knowingly going to miss a bounce. I'm going to say, have at it, bulls. Give me a 2% bounce off the lows, and I'll watch it, and I won't feel FOMO, and I'll say, okay, now bulls have proven something to me, and I feel the most likely scenario is an hourly higher low next consolidation. I'll have a support level that will invalidate my thesis if it breaks. I will be scouting that higher low because bulls proved something, and I know we have to confirm an hourly trend change if the bounce is going to get any follow through. I could also, as a swing trading bull, do that on the daily. I have no interest until the bulls prove something on the daily, and then I scout the higher low as the most likely scenario from there. So a conservative bull is not doing anything on the morning. So an aggressive bull is looking to play bounces. Conservative bull is not doing anything on the morning until bulls prove something on an hourly or a daily time frame. An aggressive bear is looking short on the morning, but definitely want a stop level nearby. Ideally, if we open and drop first thing, the high of the day on that open is then going to be the most important resistance level to be using as a potential stop. And again, the conservative bear is going to be patiently waiting for an hourly lower high or a daily lower high, depending on whether it's day trading or swing trading. So I do that every morning. Every trade, I'm laying out those scenarios to determine what time frame am I focused on and what direction am I focused on. And the way I just narrowed it down, I'm looking for an hourly lower high to be the result of the next bounce as the trade that I'm watching for later in the day today. Could I take something else once the bell rings? Yes, absolutely. Things shift very quickly. We can see clear relative strength or weakness in an individual name. That may change. But in terms of now my game plan is laid out, and I know that I don't need to be in a rush on the open. I don't need to do anything in the first 30 minutes or 60 minutes of trading. So that's what I'm looking at today. If I did want to be an aggressive bull, which names am I looking at? Well, there's a number of things you can be looking at. You could be looking at some of the names that are the most, I was going to say Meta is one of the most beat up names. When I was doing the preparation for the morning, it was absolutely smashed a couple hours ago. That's now cooled off considerably. But whenever I'm playing an aggressive bounce, I like to generally have a lead. I like to have an attempt on the weakest name because oftentimes the weakest names do see the more significant percentage bounce. But I also like to have a relative strength name in there as well. Essentially, diversifying the bounce attempt with a really weak name and a stronger name. So there are names, we can break up the market right now. Who's dropping to lower lows on the daily, like the NASDAQ, like SMH and the semiconductors? Who's testing daily support and who's nowhere near daily support right now? So you got a name like Meta or Amazon already dropping to lower lows. Amazon pre-market down at 188, dropping to a lower low. So we can organize things that way. The names that are testing support, the S&P 500, NVDA, its daily low is 104.76. We're currently $1 above that level. That support is going to be tested today, and it's going to be in play on the morning. There's a support level right there that we're going to be watching. The third category is names that have relative strength. Look at Apple. Apple currently trading at 217. Its daily low is 208. We are 4%. We would need another 4% down to get to the support level that the NASDAQ has already broken. And another one is Tesla. Tesla is currently back testing previous resistance, now attempting to be support 250. We are breaking it in pre-market. But again, its low is 217. We are not close to dropping to a lower low at this point. So in a scenario that the NASDAQ breaks support but doesn't see much follow through, we would expect names like Tesla and Apple to hold their recent lows. So that's another grouping of names to be keeping an eye on. As far as fundamentals in the week ahead, we know Wednesday's the big day, April 2nd, Trump, tariffs, yada, yada, new headlines, tweets, whatever. And, is that going to be a buy of the news scenario? For me, it's all about the preceding action leading up into a known event, where if we have 2 red days, today and tomorrow, I then have a much higher conviction that it's a buy the news event, at least in the short term, for just a daily bounce. If we get a daily bounce going today and tomorrow, I am way less confident that it is a buy the news event on Wednesday. So, if you ask me right now, I don't have the answer. I got to see how we trade today and tomorrow leading up into Wednesday. And part of the reason that I had conviction that, the invasion of Ukraine was a buy the news event is because we just dumped straight into that event. And we were in some extremes in terms of a historical RSI. So I don't know yet. I got to wait for the information in terms of what we're going to be looking for. But I do know that on this morning, the most important things for me is does the S&P 500 hold this support level, meaning the NASDAQ breaks bear without much follow through? Does NVDA hold its daily support? I'm watching those 2 things on the morning, and that's going to help us gauge essentially the short term. All right. So looking at a couple requests from Chart Guys members as we head into the open here. And again, we'll check in one more time before the bell actually rings in terms of where we stand, but little bit of cooling things off on the short term. So here's the NASDAQ 15-minute chart. So the bell's going to ring in 15 minutes. If I'm a bull, excuse me, what I want to see is a 15-minute inverse head and shoulders. I want to see any morning drop hold the low of pre-market, and then start to break these resistance levels from the way down. And that would be a 15-minute inverse head and shoulders to be shaping up the 4-hour oversold bounce. Because the 4-hour RSI is pretty extreme in the teens, can definitely go lower, but that is a time frame that we're looking for a bounce on. And then we'll look for a lower high eventually. Oftentimes, 4-hour time frames on futures line up with hourly time frames on individual names. So the NASDAQ, let's just say we bounce on the morning, its 4-hour lower high would align with, let's just say, Tesla's hourly lower high. So the bulls are going to try for a 15-minute inverse head and shoulders to get the 4-hour oversold bounce going, and we must break the morning high. We've got this double top from last night into this morning. That has to break for the 4-hour oversold bounce to be underway. So this is the most important resistance level on the morning that I care about. Then we'll look for a gap fill if we get over it back to the low of Friday, just one step at a time. So one of the requests is NVDA. So as I mentioned, we're testing this key support. And again, same thing. I do care about the lows of pre-market. If we do see the bell ring and a little bit of weakness, we've got to hold that low and then confirm the 15-minute uptrend. We would then zoom out. The hourly bounce would be underway, and I'd be looking at anything under 110.61 as an hourly lower high. In terms of those hourly lower highs, some names had just a straight waterfall drop on Friday. A name like QQQ. Just straight, well, we did have a little dinky bounce there. You can be looking at that end of Friday little pivot as the key resistance level on individual names. So NVDA, 110.61 is the most important resistance for me on the hourly. And I know that the bell can ring and we can bounce 3%, but that's what I'm talking about in terms of the most conviction that I have in terms of most likely scenario will be an hourly lower high eventually. Because again, we have space for it. We can bounce 3% on NVDA and still easily set an hourly lower high. So I will be watching these resistance levels as key for me, knowing that as long as we're an hourly downtrend, the bears are going to keep their control overall. And again, that daily support's being tested on NVDA. So I definitely do care about 104.76. And then that low of pre-market, it's right, that is that level, 104.70. So key short-term support. NKE has been getting crushed. Bigger picture. So multiple year lows, many year lows. So we're not oversold on the monthly. We're not oversold on the weekly. We are pretty beat up on the daily. Gap down on the hourly. So again, aggressive bulls. This is definitely a beat up name. And we'll be looking for, again, waterfall drop Friday, tons of space for an hourly lower high to be the result of the bounce eventually, wherever that is. But, you look at this name, do I want to be an aggressive bear and short the open? No, not with the daily crushed and the hourly crushed. I would want to wait for an hourly lower high. So really the only play here would be an aggressive bull looking for a bounce on the morning. We've got the low pre-market as a level to be watching, 62.38. The bulls must hold that, need to break the high of, again, same thing as the NASDAQ, need to break these resistance levels from extended hours. 63.06 is a little level from the way down. But just keep reminding yourself, even if you're looking as an aggressive bull, hourly lower high will be the most likely result of a bounce. Then we got to zoom out eventually for a daily lower high. So it's one time frame at a time. But bigger picture, there's not many names that are this weak and have had this much bear control over the last few years. So Tesla, we already talked about a bit. Again, 250, looking like we are going to at least break that on the open. Whether or not we close above it will matter a bit, but we got the low pre-market, 246.67 as a support level to be watching, but then it's a gap fill. There's a gap down to we're going to fill at 249.52, so I take that back. We already are filling that gap. And again, the hourly. Yes, the hourly RSI is beat up. It is down at 20, almost in the teens. Can it go lower? Again, if I'm looking at the RSI, I got to look historically, and I say, well, just a few weeks ago, that hourly RSI got down to 14, 15. So it can definitely see another leg down. And then a couple months ago, it got down to 12. So that just reminds me, yes, it's oversold. Yes, it can absolutely see another leg down. And again, same thing. There's so much space. 266 is resistance. So the bell can ring. We can bounce 5% and still look for an hourly lower high to eventually shape up. But again, aggressive bulls are going to be looking for hourly bounces on the gap down. I was considering being an aggressive bull, looking for morning trades first thing here on the public live stream. But that little bounce is enough for me to say, nah, I just don't like that everything short term just cooled off over the last hour or two. Again, yes, we can definitely still bounce when the bell rings. It's just I would have a much higher probability looking to play that bounce if these short-term time frames were in some extremes as well. So I am probably going to take the more patient route and wait for hourly lower highs. Google has been a relative bear recently. Relative weakness, already dropped to the lower low Friday. Not many names did that. And so gapping down today, small gap down, but following through. Next support level, there's some gaps back here from September. 151.15 is a gap to be keeping an eye on. Again, tons of space for an hourly lower high to be the result of the next bounce whenever that gets going. And I care about pre-market levels first thing. Look at this wall. Bears are very clearly defending 153.37 with 1, 2, 3, 4 rejections pre-market. So a simple statement, if we don't break 153.37, bulls are going nowhere on Google. That is a must-break level. Then we zoom out and scout an hourly lower high eventually. But that's our first level that we care about. WMT. So bigger picture, we are looking for an eventual monthly high or low. There's tons of space for it. Generally speaking, I keep an eye out once we get to monthly EMA 12. Daily, have we hit oversold yet? Yes. Pretty much just straight sideways recently. So we mark that low. Is that low in play first thing? 84, not quite, but it's right there. So 83.64, most important support. We had a double top, 87.74, most important resistance. So here's our sideways range. And we're going to be testing support first thing this week. Hourly lower highs nice and clear on any bounce. Anything under 85.38 is just an hourly lower high. And so this would be in the grouping of names like NVIDIA, like SPY, that is testing its recent daily low first thing. So there is a support level right nearby to be watching that the bulls are going to attempt to defend. AVGO. Another one still in a monthly uptrend. Definitely in a weekly downtrend, daily downtrend. Again, already dropping to lower lows, confirming that bear flag well before a bunch of names. small gap down, hourly resistance, 169.49. So on a name like AVGO, I have less conviction saying an hourly lower high is the most likely scenario. Why? Because it's right there where, we only need a couple percent bounce to get to that. Actually, it's a few percent. My point is, if the hourly resistance is close by, if it's, let's just say it's 2% away, then I have less conviction that an hourly lower high is the most likely scenario than I would on a name where the last hourly lower high is 5% away. So it definitely matters a little bit based on each individual setup. But again, that short-term resistance, yes, you're right. It is a similar 15-minute inverse head and shoulders attempt, similar to what the NASDAQ is trying to do here. If we break the low of pre-market, the inverse head and shoulders is invalidated. If we hold the low of pre-market, it remains on the table as a possibility here on the open. Is the gold-silver ratio telling us anything at the moment? It's telling us gold is back in charge. This is a very important zone. Gold back in charge the last 2 days. And why is that happening? Because silver ran headfirst into key resistance that everybody's watching. And the number one reason that relative strength or weakness will shift is when an individual name has a very clear level that everybody's watching. So silver hits 12-year resistance and slows down. Gold has no resistance and keeps going. But this is a very important zone. You can see this is the strongest gold has been compared to silver over the last, it goes all the way back here to January, all the way back here to March. This is a 2.5 year, very important range to be watching. So is it telling us anything right now? Not me. I know this is a very important range to be watching, but we could blow through it or we could reject, and we don't know just yet. But if we get over it, that's definitely going to be a good sign for gold bulls. Testing now. All right, one more, and then we'll get ready for the open here. LAC. I'm probably going to stop out my LIT swing attempt from a while ago. So LAC breaking to fresh lows. Earnings are no, do we already have earnings? Looks like we already had earnings. Hourly resistance is 275. Small gap down. Open is shaping up. So 275 is the most important resistance that I care about. We got support at 260, and the most important support is 238, the recent low of where we came from, to see whether or not we're going to get another leg down. Monthly time frame rejecting from EMA 12 for a couple years on the way down. We know that's the most important long-term guide. The bulls would have to confirm a monthly uptrend if anything's going to shift. We had a nice bounce there for a couple months, but we've given back a ton of it at this point. What patient bears are going to be waiting for is daily lower highs. So for example, XLF, I'm keeping an eye out for a daily lower high next time we bounce. One of the check marks that bears need to see, again, you got to see the S&P 500 break support. You got to see XLF and XLV eventually confirm those head and shoulders. But the next big one for me is, do we confirm daily downtrends as the result of the next bounce? Because if we, break support straight into a daily bounce, then we're going to start talking megaphone. Bears must confirm a daily downtrend as a result. We're coming straight off the bounce high. So that is going to be important later on in the week or whenever it shapes up. And patient bears are waiting for daily lower highs. There's a bunch of names that have a lot of space. Netflix, anything under $9.99 is going to be a daily lower high as the result of the next bounce. So that's what patient swing trade mindset bears are waiting for at this point. All right, so QQQ is trying to shape up a 15-minute right shoulder, but we would have to see the bell ring, and we'd have to head right up and break 463.57 if that is going to be the pattern that leads to that 4-hour oversold bounce taking place. And we should know within the first 10 to 15 minutes whether that's going to shape up or not. And again, if we break the low pre-market, bears will affirm they're still in complete control. The short-term RSI levels will start to get beat up again, but that will keep bulls patient. All right, deep breath. Get your game plan laid out. That support on QQQ is 460.71, about $1 away. NVIDIA testing support right away, as is SPY. Apple, look at that relative strength. Only green on my screen aside from the miners. That relative strength is very clearly standing out on Apple, as it is on the daily chart a bit. You got the other big tech names all down 1 to 2%. Biotech sector is absolutely smashed. Some headlines over the weekend with resignation, yada, yada. It was already a lead bear sector, but XBI is hitting 15-month lows or something like that. Just smashed. Breaking 81 just brought us to 2+ year lows there. Miners very quickly seeing that weakness return. The metal miners, so already breaking, the bell rings and we just dumped. Very quickly breaking the low of Friday, confirming an hourly downtrend. NASDAQ's heading back to test the low of pre-market. Checking back in on Bitcoin real quick. It had a little relative strength pre-market. Pulling back on the 15-minute. Back testing previous resistance. Definitely bulls need to see this hold as support. MSTR dropping with the NASDAQ on the open. Gap down. We're looking at support 272.50. But what are we seeing? We're seeing the NASDAQ is not confirming a right shoulder. We are testing support. The bears do still have full control. The financial sector has considerably more bounce. Big green candle first thing. So we're inverse to the NASDAQ on the open. So we can say easily XLF is a lead bull sector while QQQ remains a lead bear. We've got NVIDIA testing daily support at the moment, still holding. XLF hourly resistance from Friday is 49.29. So it's one check mark for bulls. Bulls definitely want us to see that inverse relationship between those two sectors because it's always our weakest, most bearish days where they are dropping together in tandem. But if you're a NASDAQ bull, it is all bears still. So we can say that inverse head and shoulders is negated. That is not the setup. We are now back to shorter term RSI levels getting oversold. That pre-market bounce set up the possibility of another leg down. High of the day is going to be a key resistance level on many individual names. But again, bulls have not shown anything on most names aside from the financial sector. Tesla, bunch of weakness on the open. 250 is back to resistance. We opened underneath it, tested it from the underside, and then dumped down. So now that we are seeing this other leg down, what would I need to be an aggressive bull playing the bounce before bulls prove something? I need to see these shorter term RSI get crushed as they are doing. So I'm now starting to get more interested than I was pre-market. We've got a 1-minute stair-step drop of complete bear control. Could potentially look for that as an attempt on an aggressive bounce. But it is all bears on the NASDAQ and semis. NVDA breaking daily support. QQQ, still a 1 minute stair step. Just broke. So again, I'm not doing anything at the moment, but low of the day must hold if we're going to see any kind of follow through on that 1 minute bounce attempt. Bulls want to see a 50% bounce retracement from that initial morning drop. Just not interested in the fall and knife catch at the moment. Minor bears following through a good bit. I might stop out. Where are we at? Nope, still a ways to go. Still a daily uptrend. So one thing I'm watching right now is the NASDAQ has a little bounce attempt underway. XLF is not dropping inverse to it, which again is something bulls like to see. It's trying to get back to break even. So XLF is helping SPY hold up much better than the NASDAQ. Technically, SPY did break its recent low of, no, actually take that back. We held it by 3 pennies. So that is a very important level. Short term. Got to see the NASDAQ recover to a new high of the day for any meaningful bounce to be underway. So again, we can, when we're comparing individual names here, we can watch our bounce retracement. If we're zoomed in on the 1 minute, NASDAQ right now, maybe 40, low 40% bounce retracement. Let's compare it to other individual names. Tesla bounce retracement, more significant, 50% bounce. So that's creating space for a 1 minute higher low attempt. When we top out, the bulls must confirm a 1 minute trend change if we're going to get any bounce follow through. Best case for bears from here would be for the NASDAQ to stay weak and for XLF to retrace a significant majority of the bounce that we just saw. And I believe that's what happened Friday, where XLF rolling over later in the morning was when things got really ugly. MSTR with a decent 1 minute bounce retracement. Got to confirm the 1 minute uptrend. Again, it's just one time frame at a time. And on volatile days, I do start on the 1 minute. And then eventually, once I see an uptrend confirm, I would zoom out to the 5 minute. Check in on a crypto request, AAVEUSD. Weekly bear flag already confirmed. 4-hour downtrend is our guide. Anything under 167.17, just a 4-hour lower high. So again, it's just one time frame at a time. We got to confirm an hourly trend change. Then we would have to confirm a 4-hour trend change. Then we would have to confirm a daily trend change. And all of those time frames, a lower high is the most likely result of the initial bounce. But bulls are hoping it's a bear break with zero follow through. They just haven't proven anything yet. Similar to the NASDAQ. Not proving anything for the bulls at this point. So back to the 1 minute. Again, comparing to Tesla, Tesla has a small amount of relative strength, but still needs to confirm that 1 minute uptrend. As far as individual names, Amazon and Meta are leading the way down, along with NVIDIA and Tesla. Those are all lead bears in terms of the size of their drop today. Another thing I look out for is, let's say the NASDAQ hits a new low of the day here, is I look for the individual name that doesn't hit a new low of the day. NVIDIA just hit a new low of the day, so we know it's keeping its relative weakness. New low when the NASDAQ didn't. So the 1 minute lower high was clearly set on QQQ. That's now the resistance we care about in the short term, 460.15. This is the 1 minute higher low attempt. SPY is testing 548, that low, keeping in mind that the futures low is breaking. My SPY level's adjusted for the dividend, that's why. So I'm going to be keeping an eye out here. If the NASDAQ breaks a new low of the day with no follow through, I'm going to try and find an individual name that doesn't break the low to then be a name that I may play the bounce on. So again, Tesla still has a bit more space than the NASDAQ, so it's a possibility. Double bottom at the low of the day initially. Have to break 460.15 for that to mean anything. Again, look at that Apple relative strength. It's still there. Look at its bounce. 5 minute higher low. Actually, I need to zoom in there. V-shape recovery, high of the day, much closer in play than the NASDAQ. Obviously, when you see something like this and say, okay, there's clear relative strength here, we know it's only going to last for a limited time if the NASDAQ keeps dropping. But we can say if the NASDAQ gets a bounce going, Apple is positioned very well for it. And XLF gave it all back. Bears like that. New low of the day. We know bears are happiest when all major sectors are hitting lows together. That's not happening right now, but that's what bears want to see. So Apple high of the day test. Let's look at Apple's hourly resistance. Short-term little level at 219.17 to be watching next. But again, that short-term strength won't go far if the NASDAQ keeps dumping. We did just hit a new low, so we now have a 1 minute downtrend guide on the NASDAQ. New 1 minute lower high is 459.39. So a bull can then say, I'm not doing anything as long as we keep setting 1 minute lower highs. Even an aggressive bull can say that. Tesla still no new low of the day yet. Testing now. Metal miners are getting whooped. Gold dropped pretty hard. Well, relatively speaking. It's silver that's the majority of the weakness. So NASDAQ 1 minute downtrend guide, and we do have the NASDAQ and XLF hitting lows together. Check mark for the bears. Tesla did not hit a new low. Trying to hold its double bottom. Apple bulls are still getting that aggressive dip buy when we do pull back. Gotta see the NASDAQ help. So Tesla and Apple are two of the names I highlighted pre-market that are not near their recent lows. And on the very short-term time frames, they are also attempting a little bit of relative strength here first thing. So we're going to keep watching the NASDAQ 1 minute downtrend. We are not going anywhere as long as we keep setting 1 minute lower highs. If Tesla fails 247.48, we'll watch for the possibility of an equilibrium on the 1 minute time frame to start the day. New 1 minute lower high set on QQQ. 458.63 is now our key, very short-term resistance level. Starting to get to those extremes on all the shorter term time frames as well. So here's a 1 minute trend change attempt. Must break 458.63. If it happens, we'll zoom out to the 5 minute. Otherwise, we're going to let the 1 minute dictate. Apple trying to grind it back to the high of the day. So 1 minute uptrend on QQQ. We're going to zoom out. We know that the 5 minute lower high will be the most likely result of the next bounce. Bulls then need to shape up a 5 minute trend change if things are going to shift. So one time frame at a time. Apple bears are defending the high of the day resistance. QQQ is still struggling at 1 minute EMA 12, which is not good. This is the complete bear control guide. Got to get over it. Strongest breakouts or dumps you will find ride the 1 minute EMA 12 for a while. So if I were an aggressive bull, I'd be focused on Apple or Tesla personally, just because they have given us a little bit of a sign. But again, QQQ has to participate. QQQ 5-minute bounce is now officially underway. Anything under the high of the day would be a 5-minute lower high. Bulls need to see, ideally, 50% bounce retracement from that morning drop to create the space for the trend change attempt. Those miners had a nice bounce, big dump. About 5-minute bounce underway. So gauging 5-minute bounce retracement sizes will help us gauge who's stronger, who's weaker. Tesla's breaking that short-term little resistance level, so it's already bounced 50% plus retracement of the morning drop. Again, just that tiny little detail of holding the low when the NASDAQ broke. We also have to keep in mind on these little short-term bounces, they do cool things off and open up the door for the possibility of another leg down. So aggressive bulls definitely need to be respecting stops and limiting their risk. Must confirm the 5-minute uptrend from here. XLF back to a decent bounce again. Let's check its bounce retracement. NASDAQ bulls are going to be open for a 2-minute inverse head and shoulders. You can see the resistance from the way down. If we fail around 460.15, it'll then be the bulls needing the 2-minute trend change to confirm. So bulls got the 1 minute. Now they'll need the 2-minute or the 5-minute. It's just one time frame at a time. Tesla continues its very short-term relative strength since the bell rang. High of the day, 250.88 key level. You can see Apple's morning strength is fading. Why? Because bears successfully defended high of the day resistance. So now it's tightening up. Sideways on Apple. So we'll stick with the NASDAQ 2-minute for now. much of my morning is just starting zoomed in and then gradually zooming out as we get more and more data. Eventually, 10:30 or so, I usually am on the 15-minute time frame. So NASDAQ is now testing that little level from the way down. Quantum names have a pretty solid bounce. QBTS back to the high of the day. Obviously, any name hitting the high of the day at this point is standing out. Nice quick 2% bounce on GDX. Not quite 2%, but approaching. And again, the most likely scenario on something like this with significant volatility in both directions, we know to keep an eye for equilibriums. RGTI, the other quantum name, already getting that high of the day. Similar to Apple, Tesla is slowing down as the high of its morning is being defended. XLF bounce retracement well over 50%, so creating the space for a 5-minute higher low to try and form next consolidation. NASDAQ now over 50%. Still a 2-minute stair step from the low. At this point, I am on the 5-minute. Anything under the high of the day is a 5-minute lower high. If we fail it, we must confirm the 5-minute uptrend. It's fairly slowish on the morning, just as far as the speed of the action. Generally tells us it's not a high volume morning at the moment, probably higher than midweek last week. Let's check in on TLT. TLT is trying to put in a longer term inverse head and shoulders. It's been very choppy for me on a bunch of time frames. 2-week time frame a bit condensed and more clear. Trying for that inverse head and shoulders. So again, aggressive bears are watching for 5-minute lower highs. Personally, would stick to the hourly. That's my plan. SPY's high of the day is coming into play before the NASDAQ thanks to the financial sector and healthcare sector's bounce. So just like we did on the bull side where we said who's holding the low of the day as the NASDAQ hits a new low, one of the answers was Tesla. Bears are looking at the same thing. Let's say NASDAQ breaks the high of the day. Bears want to find the names that are not breaking their high of the day. XLF trying to make it back to a high of the day test on its V-shaped bounce attempt. Tesla's definitely struggling at 250. Again, that was a tough resistance on the initial bounce attempt. 250 to 253 with extended hours. Tesla new high before the NASDAQ. Definitely need follow through and need the NASDAQ to join as well. Both still will have to eventually confirm the 5-minute uptrends, but again, bulls have a lot of space now for that 5-minute higher low next consolidation. GRRR definitely having a very strong morning. Again, still got to confirm that 5-minute trend change, just like everybody does. But a significant bounce. Nice tightening daily range. Most important resistance rejected the price. Short term, 28.50. And earnings are after hours, it looks like. Definitely got to double check that. GDXJ, 2.5% bounce from that flush. Bulls trying to hold daily EMA 12 support there for the uptrend. MSTR new high of the day, so a little bit of relative strength there thanks to Bitcoin. I assume Bitcoin holding that back test. Dipped well below it, but holding the lows. But again, so you look at MSTR, you say, great, we got a new high of the day check mark for bulls. Just still have to get that 5-minute trend change. It's so important. So many times we see a significant move one direction or the other. But if you don't establish, in this instance, supports on the way up, it's easy to retrace a significant amount. Got to confirm 5-minute uptrends. MARA had more dilution news over the weekend. The miners, the crypto miners have just been as disappointing as you can get. We saw that a long time ago. That relative strength was glaring back in the day, many months ago. Might have just said relative strength, I mean relative weakness. So if you are looking to be a bull and you don't have a position yet, you are waiting for a 5-minute high or low. Again, it's just how aggressive do you want to be? It determines the time frame. More patient, you want to miss an hourly bounce and scout the hourly high or low. Both QQQ and XLF are pulling back just under the high of the day at the moment. For names that do break their high of the day, the next level you're going to look at is the gap fill. So Tesla has you got pre-market resistance levels as well. But Tesla bulls are hoping to see an hourly bounce get going towards the gap fill 260.57. But Tesla has not confirmed a 5-minute uptrend yet. AR just need to be cautious of a potential rising wedge there. As we know, we don't ever want to bull flag with no follow through. So still holding on fine, but put your bear glasses on so that wouldn't surprise you. Now that most important level is 39.21 because if that breaks, that's going to increase the probabilities of a potential rising wedge. If not, bulls keep their control. NVDA's bounce. High of the day, 105.79 being tested. QQQ 462.52, high of the day is $1 away. I care more about the 5-minute trend than I do the high of the day. Big time minor bounce. XLF high of the day test, 49.06. So one of the important takeaways of the stream so far, hopefully the pre-market prep, but the other biggest takeaway is finding the name that holds the low when the indice hits a lower low and vice versa with the high if looking bearish. And the other main takeaway is those short-term RSI levels were not extreme into the open. We opened, we saw another leg down. They did get extreme, and then it was the better bounce opportunity. Before the bell rang, we had only 4-hour oversold in the NASDAQ After the bell rang, we had 5-minute, 15-minute, 30-minute, hourly, 4-hour. Another aspect of the conservative or aggressive conversation is, of course, position size. You know, I can put myself in an aggressive bull position to buy, but if I don't want to, you know, use my standard day trade position size because things are a bit more volatile, I can use 2/3 of my standard position size. All different kinds of ways to be aggressive or conservative. Apple Bulls definitely disappointed. They're not getting a new high of the day here. Just sideways tightening up, all while the NASDAQ had a very solid bounce. MU, thanks for the reminder. Yes, MU big support test. This is the V support. Recent lows 111.75, Recent lows 83.32, 83.98. Low of today 84.10. This is a very important long-term support zone here. How far can gold pull back? Very far. We take it one time frame at a time. We're still in a 4-hour uptrend, but why can't gold pull back 10%? It definitely can. But as long as the 4-hour uptrend is in control of the bulls, there's nothing to worry about. You know, me being in a swing position in my minors, I care the most about the daily time frame. I don't have anything to worry about if the daily uptrend is intact. What's a good way to determine whether to be bull or bear? Trends. We are in daily and weekly downtrends on many individual names. That's favoring the bears, of course. But again, it's the morning. If you missed the morning rundown that I did, maybe at 9-10 a.m., that's the in-depth way to determine the direction you're looking on the morning. QQQ still a 5-minute stair-step bounce right under the high of the day. XLF right under the high of the day. When we lose the 5-minute stair-step, we must confirm a 5-minute uptrend. Volume. So bulls definitely want to see volume increasing on bounces. And for individual names, you know, individual stock, it is important for me. Well, all right, let's get nuanced here. The indices themselves, SPY as the ETF, does not need significant volume to go up. If you look back at Trump's first term, 2016, 2017, it was just perpetual all-time high grind on very low volume. And so that period of trading told me that the indice does not need significant volume to go up. The normal pattern of the morning is the highest volume at the open, and then it slowly dwindles and fades all morning into midday, lunch, lull. That's a very common pattern. So you look at QQQ and say, well, the volume's fading all bounce, and that is true. But you also have to take into account that's the normal pattern. The normal pattern is the highest volume in the first 5 minutes, the first 15 minutes, and then it just slowly, generally speaking, it will slowly just flatten out. So it's a bit tricky to look at that and say, well, we're not increasing bull volume. It would be very unusual for me if we were seeing 5-minute increasing bull volume on this bounce. And that would be notable. We would say that's a great sign for the bulls. But it's not a red flag that there is an absence of it. That antivirus reminder, it happens when I'm live streaming and I remember, oh, I got to change that. And then an hour goes by of more live streaming and I forget. And then it's up the next day. Maybe I should write it down. So those quantum stocks still have one of the better bounces going. They're in the green. Again, green is rare on the morning at this point, but big 5-minute bounce. So again, as an individual name here, RGTI is putting in some higher bull volume. That's a good sign. 5-minute stair step from the low of the day. Still do got to confirm that 5-minute trend change, but again, tons of space to work with. Those names are pretty much a leveraged version of the NASDAQ. They're going to do what the NASDAQ does, just more magnified. Apple did get that new high of the day finally. NASDAQ still hasn't. How can someone go from being a student of the charts to being on their own? Well, I would say I've never been on my own as a trader. I do my own thing, I make my own decisions, but I'm always interacting with other people in a chat room, in a community for well over a decade at this point. Before the chart guys, I was doing it. It's essential, in my opinion, to be bouncing ideas off each other, getting differing perspectives. But in terms of having the confidence to make your own decisions and your own trades, you just got to dive in with very small capital. Trade with 10 shares or whatever to just start getting the reps in. You need the muscle memory. You study up how to work out. You read, you watch the YouTube videos. Okay, now what? You go in the gym and you start lifting small weights. Got to get the reps in. Have a little bit of emotions on the line, so you see how that gets impacted by price movement. Get used to executing, placing the actual orders. So QQQ 5-minute lower high is set. We now know anything above the low of the day is a 5-minute higher low. If I'm a bear, I want to give back over half of that bounce. If I'm a bull, I want to give back less than half of that bounce. But we know the burden is definitely still on bulls, and we must confirm 5-minute uptrends. Otherwise, not much changes. We're looking for equilibriums on a bunch of these names, like the miners, GDX, 5-minute lower high set. No real support established on the way up. That's when we scout tightening ranges. XLF and QQQ are doing similar things right now. Both got right up to the high of the day and failed. Now we've got 5-minute consolidation. Well, XLF not officially underway yet. So now I want to look at the semiconductors and see that they were a bit stronger than the NASDAQ by breaking the high of the day, but same deal. Need the 5-minute trend change. Tesla 5-minute consolidation well underway, giving back a solid chunk of the bounce. Any aggressive bears that were playing 5-minute lower highs, looking to perhaps trim a little bit of the position to be in full control. Just using the stair steps as an example. Tesla 5-minute stair step breaks bear at 249.45. We quickly drop $2. If you sell half the position on the 5-minute stair step trigger, your break even is now 251.45, up near the high of the day. Same thing for those miners. 5-minute stair step was a great bull signal and a great bear signal at this point. 45.50 was the trigger. If you sell half right now, stop over the high, risk-free, bounce high. The more extreme the volatility, the more confidence you have in stair steps getting some follow through. So that's all we care about from here. We're almost an hour into the morning. If we confirm the 5-minute uptrends, QQQ would be at a new high of the day. One of the major questions for me will be, can QQQ and XLF both confirm a 5-minute uptrend and new high of the day? Does only one of them do it? That would shift confidence a bit as to what the answer is. And if the bulls do confirm 5-minute uptrends, we will then have the hourly bounces well underway, and we'll zoom out. Some of the hourly bounces already are underway. But then we would zoom out and scout those eventual hourly lower highs later today, whether it's midday, afternoon. I use the 5-minute uptrend as my guide. When scouting an hourly lower high, I watch for 5-minute rising wedges, 5-minute head and shoulders, something that's telling me that the bounce is slowing. But that's not on the table unless bulls follow through with proving the short term here. So tightening ranges are the most likely scenario for another bit. Again, watching the retracement on QQQ. Still less than 50%. If we get back more than 50%, then 5-minute equilibrium shifts to the most likely scenario where we will look to do this until later morning. So I'm going to wrap it up, anticipating things are going to sideways a bit here. Appreciate you tuning in from the outside world. Check out chartguys.com if you liked it. Otherwise, current members, I'll see you in the chat room after I pee.